Hello, good evening, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of epic racing action in the one and only Middle of the Pack Racing League, falling to PCUP Championship for 2025, as brought to you on the Premier Sim Racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. Today, we take a look back at all the racing action from round 3 of 8 in the championship, and well, we kick off an American doubleheader to see out the first half of the season, the Middle of the Pack Racing League Cup, and then we kick off with perhaps the arguably one of the most thrilling circuits in the world, if not the ultimate adrenaline junkie roller coaster rider road racing. Of course, it is the Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta in the US state of Georgia, and what a circuit it is. 2.54 miles in length and span the best part of 12 corners. These corners absolutely blending together a wide myriad of corner types, predominantly sweepers, but also the chicanes intermingled in there, plus also elevation changes that are non-stop throughout. And it doesn't just stay with the corners that the elevation changes come. With an incredibly long back straight, seeing our drivers have to plunge their way through one of the biggest drops in the world, and then to rise their way up to complete the racing lap. This is a circuit that takes no prisoners when it comes to being flat out full throttle all the way, and those who are able to keep their throttle in it to win it, they may just find themselves coming away victorious, whereas those who push too hard or a little bit too sensitive, well, they may find themselves short of victory and instead on the way to misery. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this live broadcast, albeit post-round from circuit side. You're tuning into a broadcast that is live right now, and it's available on both YouTube and Twitch. On YouTube, it's available on youtube.com, and search for TX1TX, all 30 Paul Walsh, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via YouTube. We say hello to you guys and girls, and of course, you do have the broadcast available on twitch.tv/TX11, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via Twitch. But this is a live post-round broadcast, so the racing action you are seeing actually occurred a little bit earlier on this month. It occurred all the way back on Wednesday, the 15th of October 2025, but we're bringing it to you as if it were live today on a fine Monday, the 20th of October. In the commentary booth, my name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX1 or Britain and Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I do not know what happens in the practice session that's currently coming to a close, nor the qualifying session that's upcoming, or the race itself, and that's why it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience for you guys and girls tuning in at home. And if you do happen to know the outcome, if you happen to know any part of the results, the full results, we of course do ask that you don't put any potential spoilers in our respective chats for the guys and girls tuning in at home, who first and foremost they'll still be surprised to, and they'll be very eager to see how it all plays out for the third round of the championship. But as we come into this round then, well, our schedule for tonight, times in British Summertime, that's BST, or Universal Coordinate Time +1, UTC +1, and as we can see in just under 7 minutes time, we'll be making our way into our third qualifying session of the season, and we'll be taking a breather from qualifying sessions as of next week, of course, because it'll be a feature race round. This will be the last of our sprint race rounds before we go to the mid-season break, and after our 10-minute qualifying session, it will be our 35-minute sprint race. So that all-important pit stop run into the mix, and that's due to get underway at approximately 8:20 this evening. But as we get set and ready to go racing, we need to recap the season so far and what is lying in wait, not just for this round, but also the rounds ahead. And here we go then. Let's take a little look back to how things have proceeded. Because as we can see, last time out in round number 2, we were in Portugal at the Portimao circuit, also known as the Autodrome International do Algarve, depending on your preference. That was on the 8th of October, and the story on the 8th of October was one where we saw Matt Best bring home an absolutely brilliant second place overall and in the pro class. However, the big name that took the headlines at Portimao was none other than Jaden Calloway, who missed the opening round, but absolutely delivered a dominant and controlled drive to victory following a superb pole lap, and indeed, he has put himself right up there as a key player in the title fight of the pros. As for Am, well, as we'll go on to see in the standings very shortly, Shahu Zahair made it 2 from 2, and right now has started to carve his way at the head of the pack, and can anybody slow him down? But of course, having opened up at Montreal and then Portimao, we've gone from 2 old school circuits to one that's of a very different vibe and nature, and therefore Road Atlanta could definitely spring some surprises today, And could we see some new names at the very top of the standings when all is said and done? Well, we'll have to wait and see, because Pro so far has been the story of Matt Best. Meanwhile, in the AM class, it's definitely been the story of Shahi Zahair. And after Road Atlanta, because this is an American doubleheader in round number 4 in a week's time, we're going to Long Beach in the US state of California for the feature race to wrap up the first half of the season, and that'll be on the 22nd of October. But let's talk a little bit about the standings then, and the points specifically. And as we can see, after 2 rounds, beginning with the Pro Drivers' Championship, it is Matt Best on 97 points to 91 of Jason Landry. It was a difficult round for Jason Landry compared to Best. Landry having that spin at the hairpin late on in the race, and it cost him dear, and it cost him what could have been an opportunity to try and swipe away a second place for Matt Best. But then again, just goes to show how hard all the drivers have pushed each other, and Landry finding his limits right at the very close, but also finding, much like many, this Porsche Cup 992 GT3 machine is a very different beast compared to what the MPRL is used to racing, and arguably this is the toughest test of driving ability that we have seen in 4.5 years of Championship Series here at the middle of the pack racing league, or at least for as long as I've commentated them, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen. But enough about me, let's talk a little bit more about further down. Our top 2 are peeling away, and then Daniel McConnell right now on 77 points, he's 2 ahead of Tom Bright. It's getting very close between the pair there, and it's a further 20 points to Jaden Calloway. Of course, he missed the season opener, so he's at a bit of a deficit, but he will be looking to try and close the gap, knowing the season opener formed his one and only drop score for the season. And therefore, right now, he really needs to score big in all the remaining rounds, including the one today. James Logsdon sits in 6th, ahead of David Adeyi. And then we do have Julian Jones and Justin Braggon wrapping up the championship standings there. But we didn't have Logsdon on the grid last time out. He's back today, so therefore, he'll be looking to go for gold, as will David Adeyi, as always. Albeit, I do believe Adeyi's not here. And in fact, I've just had an update to tell me that Matt Best is not here either. So this is definitely a major opportunity for likes of Jason Landry, also Daniel McConnell, James Logsdon, and Jaden Calloway, and Julian Jones. So this could be a very intriguing round when it comes to Pro. As for Anne, meanwhile, Shahi Zahair, 5 points ahead of Blake Phillips. Now, to be fair to Blake Phillips, whilst he has not taken the headline so far, it's really been the Zahair story, Phillips has been ultra cool and consistent in second place across both races. And therefore, you would imagine that if he can find a way to undermine Zahair's pace, alternatively this circuit suits him a little bit more compared to his rival, he may be able to beat the Sri Lankan at his own game and start to close the gap. Glenn Bratton and Jermaine Warren, they both sit on 69 points, which is a nice score to be on. Most importantly, Bratton ahead of Warren based on result countback, and Nick Bader only 4 points behind, and a third point to Billman DaCosta. My point being here, it is very close in the fight for third at the moment, and that's before you forget about Mark Senegal, because of course he has missed a round so far in this championship, and well, if he's able to score big, he may get himself right back in that hunt, and all 5 of those drivers may be able to get themselves right back in the hunt for the top 2. Indeed, our top 2 have been superstars so far, but there's a long way to go. Talking a little bit about our circuit for today, well, it's the full course. We couldn't go on any other layout other than the full course of the Michelin Raceway at Road Atlanta, located near the town of Brazelton in Hall County of the US state of Georgia. Well, big thank you to iRacing.com for their 2-dimensional track map. Indeed, it comes with a simulator. It's a brilliant simulator and brilliant track maps included. However, there's only one problem with such a track map. We do not get to see the sheer severity of the elevation changes and how quick they come. And therefore, we won't dwell too much on this image. Indeed, you're going to be seeing some onboards from our drivers in qualifying, and that'll give you the true story of what it's like to deliver a lap around Road Atlanta. Indeed, this circuit has seen racing throughout multiple decades, and the one theme of it all has been just how quick and aggressive this circuit is. Whether it be the big sweeping uphill right-hander at turn 1, the descent for the Esses at turns 3, 4, and in towards 5, with the Esses having no corner numbers to them. It's just a weave and wind before they spit their way out to turn 5, or is it the 90 rights at turn 6 and 7, and the run down that back straight that's had to be extended over the years, and a chicane's had to be added into it for safety concerns at turns 10A and 10B, and it's the run over the hill of 11 and down past pit entry at turn number 12 to complete the lap and do it all over again. Well, definitely take a deep breath, ladies and gents, because this is going to be one to watch out for. As for our rules, setup-wise, drivers shall have running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League, with fuel loads restricted to 40%. A closed qualifying format shall be used. We'll see that very shortly when we do go into qualifying. And in terms of our sprint race, the race shall start by a standing start, as is a tradition of Porsche Cup racing around the world, with each driver having one fast repair available. And as well as seeing our drivers coming to the pits potentially for fuel stops, we may also see them coming to the pits. They picked up a drive-through penalty for 15 or more instant points, and that definitely was a big factor last time out at Portimao in terms of nerves for our drivers, but maybe no me a factor here today at Road Atlanta, because if you get it wrong, you very quickly find yourself on the grass or into a barrier, and indeed track limits are not as big a concern here at Road Atlanta because they naturally self-police. But let's head back to circuit side, and as we do, well, the great news is we are only moments away from making our way into will be the qualifying session, ladies and gentlemen. So we're not going to talk too much about our drivers at this point, because you can see them all parked up there in the pit lane, apart from a couple of drivers who are making their way around. Without further ado, it is time for qualifying. Who's going to be on pole? Let's find out in this closed qualifying session. So, qualifying gets underway, and as it does, it is 10 minutes. It is go, 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 and all the drivers right now, they'll make the way out of the pits as quickly as they can. But who is going to be the one who comes away on top? As we do bring you that full time at the top of your screen there, and indeed, the time will count gradually upwards, and it will count up in qualifying to only count down in the race. But as we see James Logsdon, one of many, making his way on out there, well, right now, what is going to be the story here of qualifying? Well, we're going to have to find out, but while the big things will be around here, who is going to be able to drive on the absolute limit once they've got those tyres up to temperature and be able to deliver the best possible lap? Because as you'll see when we do get a couple on board, this circuit, where it's not for the faint-hearted, and having raced GT3s on the iRacing simulator around here, ladies and gentlemen, of which the Porsche Cup car is a GT3-esque car, albeit if you were to compare the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup car versus its actual GT3 counterpart, the difference is this is the road car without all the aerodynamic refinements. So it's got all the weight reduction, and also it does have a different balance of performance compared to the GT3 class machine. It's the same engine, the 4-litre flat 6 machine, 510 brake horsepower at the rear wheels, but it doesn't have all the aerodynamic refinement. It is effectively the road GT3 car with a massive rear wing added to it, and that's why Logsdon right now, he's taking his time and he is building up as much temperature as possible here, because those tyres need a huge amount of heat in them if you want to attack these quarters for attack. They don't have that many laps available either when it comes to this closed qualifying session, so what will likely happen if Logsdon and Landry are both of the same mindset is they'll put in one banker lap and then it will be all or nothing in the subsequent laps. There is nothing to be left out there. They will all be attacking lap after lap in this qualifying session. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few drivers go to the grass, but indeed those who shed some grass to do some lawn mowing, well, it will give way to those who are able to keep it on the black stuff and come away victorious in qualifying. But qualifying is just one part of the story, and over the race distance, over 35 minutes, this is not going to be an easy feat, whether you are pro or am. And if we look to other am drivers here, Mark Senegal, as he powers his way on out here and roaring his way onwards at this point, and in towards turns 6 and 7 he comes. Now, what you also need to keep in mind around here is how important is qualifying. Well, arguably, qualifying is quite important because of the fact the first half a lap is very hard to overtake in, and indeed it's all about following the leader, whereas the second half a lap is more overtaking driven. Turns 1 through to 5 really denote the first half of laps, the end of the Esses and that quick left-hander, and then from the 90 right to turn 6 and 7, that's the second half lap, and this long back straight, which you'll see instead of roar his way on down, that's where you're going to see a lot of the overtaking action occur. But if somebody gets it wrong in the opening stage of the lap, don't rule out the fact you may see some drivers go too wide, but into the Esses, somebody is going to have to give way. Otherwise, it may all go astray for both drivers involved, and indeed, we've seen some drama over the years around Road Atlanta, both in real life and on the simulator, and Road Atlanta always keeps us guessing. But first lap's come on the board, and Jaden Calloway sets the pace at a 1 minute 20.777. Well, somebody's feeling lucky today, and I think it's Jaden Calloway for ITD West as he heads up the hill. Some more laps are starting to come in. Jason Landry for 21.219. Bratton and Phillips, they start to set laps as well. Bratton a bit further down at 22.978. Logsdon moves into fourth at a 22.043. Shahi's ahead. That's an impressive and a highly respectable lap there. 21.185. 4 tenths off the pole man right now. Provisional pole as he makes way on to another lap. But he'll feel as though now the target's going to be to make sure Blake Phillips can't get any closer, because Calloway is in his own postcode in qualifying at the moment, 4 tenths faster than everybody else. Then look at Zuhair, Landry and Phillips. Less than 1.5 tenths between the two, and it's a 3.5 tenths gap to Aaron Lahr, who, well, in fact, he's changed the livery of the car. And indeed, that's a bit of a news flash there, that it's a new livery on the car today, although I think he did run this livery, to be fair, in the previous rounds, but we're so used to seeing him in the lime green machine. But the number 47 driver has gone for something a little bit more turquoisey green, which is always great to see a bit of a change up. But indeed, it does make me a little bit sad not to see the lime green machine out there from Aaron Lahr. And Aaron, if you are listening right now, don't change your livery. As much as we do miss seeing the lime green machine, the fact that you're out there right now in a similar machine and a very nice livery to boot as well, we're very happy to see you out there giving it your all, as always, good sir. But as he heads in towards turn 6 and 7, this second lap coming towards a close for him, but perhaps even more providently so for Jason Landry as he roars his way in towards the final quarter. What's he going to do this time? Well, we'll see as we also jump aboard then for a flying lap of Road Atlanta, brought to you by Jason Landry. So into turn number 1 he goes, braking 150 metres for quarter apex, dropping down a gear to fourth. Now up the hill, bringing the car over to the right hand side for the left-hand curve or two, but you brake nice and early here because you're braking for turn number 3. You can't see it, and then suddenly it arrives and you clatter the apex curve, as does Landry does, down through turn 4, and now into the SE goes. Lift off the throttle, point the car right, left, right, and now quickly onto the brakes. Make sure not to lock up, drop 2 gears into third, and back on the throttle immediately. Use the exit curve, then the camber of the curve in order to settle the car down, and now it's flat out all the way in towards turn number 6. looking to his left for his brake marker. We'll use the 200-yard board there as he comes down to third gear at the apex. Now back at the throttle immediately, and early on the brakes here. Patience is so key at turn number 7. But does he get it right? He does. Uses all the exit curve there, plus a bit of value-added tarmac. And as he makes his way down the back straight, for Jason Landry, it's been a very good start to lap so far. And the fuel alarm's going off there. You can see on the dashboard, it means he's quite low on fuel at this point as he powers his way down towards turn number 10. Flat out for the curves of turns 8 and 9, and now getting ready for the braking zone here. Coming all the way down onto the brakes, 162 miles an hour, down into third gear, then into second, left into right here. Does he get the traction coming out the corner? Fights for the steering wheel as he heads over the crest, and now in towards turn number 12, where it's a quick lap for Jason Landry, but how high is it going to be? Calloway's the man to beat on a 20.654. Jason Landry, a 20.760. It's a respectable lap for Landry. He has got one more available to him if he wants to go for it. I think Landry's decided enough's enough. He's not got any more in the tank there. And, well, Landry couldn't quite dethrone Calloway, but logs to me on a 20.951, just behind Blake Phillips. And Phillips at IT West has done a brilliant job. In fact, Le Pit Club, I should say there. The Le Pit Club, as he roars wound down. Goodness me, getting the two liveries mixed up there very slightly. Very similar configurations. But Blake Phillips doing a fantastic job there and really putting a spike in amongst the group as Julian Jones for ITD West. We get the team right this time around. A 1 minute 20.605. That's a surprise there, but Jones puts himself right at the top of the pile and right at the depth of the qualifying session. We've still got a couple of drivers out there. James Logston is on a cool-down lap, and Daniel McConnell is the only driver right now who's out there on a valid qualifying lap for Texas Speed Sim Racing. With Matt Best not here today, he's represented the team by himself, and well, Nick Bader is yet to settle lap, but something tells me that Bader might be choosing to start from the very back of the field and work his way upwards accordingly, unless he's got a technical issue. But as we see McConnell roaring his way left into right here, well, right now, what's it going to be as he comes to the end of his second flying lap? He's down in 8th at the moment, but he is on a personal best here in sectors 1, 2 and 3. Can he go for the full quartet here and perhaps put himself a bit further up? He wants to be in the top 5 if he can. 21.218, that puts him onto the 4th row of the grid, a little bit higher, just ahead of Aaron Law, who is at the end of the pit lane right now, but he can't go out and do any more laps because he has used up all his valid laps. And McConnell right now has got one more lap to throw at this. So we jump on board here on the dashboard. And this really gives you an idea of the driver's perspective as he makes his way on down. It's so scary here going through the S's. And remember, for McConnell, it is all about positioning and commitment at all these corners. Keeping in mind, these Porsche Cup cars as well have no anti-lock braking system, no ABS, unlike a GT3 car, nor do they have any traction control system or TCS. And indeed, it all comes down to the driver modulating the machine. As of next year, we are hearing rumours that the Porsche Super Cup is moving to what will be a series that does have ABS on the car, and therefore we will see that most likely come to iRacing subsequently as a result, because iRacing does follow Porsche Super Cup rulings. Whatever configuration the cars are in there, they are replicated here in iRacing. But McConnell right now are on his way down the back straight, and as he does so, well, it's been a good first sector. That middle sector through the S's has not been as strong for McConnell. It's actually been quite a weak one, his weakest one so far in qualifying. And now heading in towards the chicane. Left and right he goes. Runs a little bit deep there for 10A. He does get it back together, however, with 10 being over the crest. And well, down he comes. And for McConnell, it's full commitment to the very end. Good middle sectors, and now heading towards the timeline. It puts him 5th. It's a great last stand from Daniel McConnell, and the Texas Speed Racing driver doing a fantastic job of putting himself right at the top end of the 3rd row of the grid. Well, he was ahead of Logston by only 4 thousandths in the end, and Blake Phillips has put himself in that 2nd row of the grid. 2 tenths off the pole time. Here's Aaron Law parked up for you right now. He's got nothing left in the tank to go, but that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen, and we have only got a minute or so left. But we do say hello there to Speed Tech in the YouTube chat, who says they're nipping at proper GT3 lap times. Indeed, the laps around here are so quick in these Porsche Cup cars. And well, the difference, of course, between the GT3 as well as the aerodynamic fit is that the GT3 is more power restricted by comparison, normally around the region of around 500 to 550 horsepower, whereas these Cup cars are 510 horsepower out of the box. But you've got to keep in mind there is a balance of performance, and that will differ from circuit to circuit as to what will be the gear ratios that can be used by the Porsche Cup cars in their GT3 configuration versus what you are seeing here today, where they are completely according to a fixed setup. So everyone's running the same gear ratios, the same setup on the car, but they have no artificial restrictions when it comes to the engine power being delivered. It's 510 horsepower, absolutely raw and native to that 4-litre 6-cylinder screaming machine that's naturally aspirated by Porsche Motorsport. But qualifying is complete, and presuming all these lap times are valid, we are going to be seeing Julian Jones take pole position by half a tenth over Jaden Calloway. It's going to be a lockout of what will be Jones and Calloway at the front row, and Jason Landry a further 10th behind. We're wondering where exactly was the time, and Blake Phillips will be, of course, for his first pole position of the season. But will it work out the way? Well, we go from qualified to the race, ladies and gentlemen. Let's find out, and who could do the dance over 35 minutes of racing. So as they all make their way to the grid, this is how they'll line up for round number 3 of the 2025 Middle of the Pack Racing League for Into PCUP Championship on iRacing. It is confirmed that Julian Jones takes pole position for ITD West Interns Pro Esports Division, and he will be joined on that front row of the grid by none other than Jaden Calloway for ITD West. On row number 2, it is going to be the combination pairing of none other than Jason Landry for Sunday GT Turtles and pole sitter for the Pit Club Sim Racing of Blake Phillips. Then we're going to have Daniel McConnell for what will be Texas Speed Sim Racing, starting in 5th place, just ahead of James Logston for Bear Pope Zero. But look at how close that top 6 was, only 3.5 tenths between them. And then you do have a sizable gap of just over 2 tenths to Shahi Zahair, the 2nd place, and driver for ITD West Senior Vice Presidents. The Sri Lankan driver there having a bit of a difficult qualifying session on the circuit, not quite suited him. Aaron Lar will start 8th, the privateer from Canada, just ahead of fellow countryman Mark Senegal, who for Sunday GT Turtles was 1.6 seconds off the pole and 1.1 seconds off of Zahair's time. And Glenn Bratton was a further 3 attempts down the road, round off your top 10. Outside the top 10, only one more row to go, and starting 11th, it was Billman DaCosta for Bear Pope Zero, head of Nick Bader, who set no valid lap. Hopefully it's not a sign that there's a problem with the car and he's able to make it to the grid, but otherwise we may only have 11 cars here at Road Atlanta today, ladies and gentlemen. But we have seen so far in 2 rounds of racing what we lack in quantity of drivers, we definitely make up for in terms of the quality of the racing. And I get the feeling we're going to see that again here today, as all that grid is almost set and we are only moments away from going green flag racing for what will be our 3rd round of the championship. As all our drivers get themselves into position, everyone absolutely itching to go racing. We're just waiting on Logston and Bader to take their slots on the grid. They do have the best part of another 10 seconds or so. But for Julian Jones, it is a long run down. But in fact, the grid's set, ladies and gentlemen. And well, here we go then for what will be round number 3. The lights are on, the revs rise. And it's lights out and away we go here for round number 3 of the championship. 35 minutes of racing. And it's Jaden Calloway who's had the better start on the outside here as they head towards turn 1. Blake Phillips also gets a great launch. They go into turn 1 side by side here up the hill. And in the end, Calloway on that outside line. He's forced a little bit wide now. Blake Phillips goes too wide up towards turn number 2. Hoping to hold the inside into 3. But he plays it conservatively there. In the end, gets pinched slightly. But as they come down the hill, everyone battling side by side. Oh no! That's going to roll Logston. And where's McConnell into contact there? Didn't quite see how that started, but we've seen how it's ended. Both drivers having a bump with the wall. They survived it. Jason Landry's got it wrong into the Esses. So Landry there in the rear of your picture. He's gone sideways. He's going to rejoin only once the rest of the field clears. Well, you can see McConnell there to take evasive action to the grass, but hopefully he makes it back onto the tarmac shortly. But it's been drama in this open lap already, and then not even half a lap in. As we come to Blake Phillips, as he makes his way through turns 6 and 7. Well, right now, the AM pole sitter is under pressure from Shahi Zahair. Zahair is right there with him. And the Pit Club Sim Racing driver right now is going to have to dig in quite deep here in order to make sure that Zahair does not find his way through over the race distance. Well, how about that? We were saying in the build-up to today, of course, that Zahair may find the circuit doesn't quite suit him, but qualifying seemed to say that. However, now that we're going racing, it's the shoe is on the other foot, and Zahair immediately trying to pounce there in towards the chicane. Can't quite find it this time, but this will be giving him confidence. This will be telling him he can get the job done, as unfortunately not getting the job done today will be Nick Bader. A technical issue with the car. He has had to retire before going to the grid, so it'll be a non-start from Bader, and that's going to be a sad start to his American doubleheader. But after 1 lap of racing, plenty of action to come. And here we see Glenn Bratton versus Billman DaCosta versus James Logston. Logston looking up the inside of Bratton immediately into turn 1, trying to make amends for a poor lap 1. And we're up the inside there into opening corner, as that's wide for DaCosta, his teammate. DaCosta comes back on, but he's going to lose 2 places overall. Most critically, he'll lose 4th place in the AM class to Bratton as they come over the crest and down they romp. Well, that's a bit of an unfortunate one for DaCosta, but still, he's got time and he can bring himself back into the flow. I think they're perhaps just being caught out a little bit by his teammate coming up the inside and perhaps thinking to let his teammate go, but in the process goaded himself into an error, because we do know that DaCosta and Logston, they work very hard together at Bear Pope Zero. They don't want to step on each other's toes. There's been some brilliant teamwork over the years, and in the season we've seen them race, and DaCosta there just trying to steer clear, but in the end making a bit of a mistake of his own doing. back to the front of the field. Well, Julian Jones, he's starting to pull a bit of a gap here versus Jaden Calloway after Calloway put the pressure early on. Now it seems like the two are a little bit of a standstill. Meanwhile, Blake Phillips, AM leader, he seems to be getting himself right into the trend now. It's tyre temperature that's coming his way, and Shahi Zahir seems to be the king of the cool tyres when it comes to the AMs. However, now that Phillips has got the tyre temperature after what is almost 2 laps, it seems though now it's going to be a bit more equal between them, as Aaron Lahr may have a role to play here as we jump aboard with the 5th place man in the number 47, taking all the apex curve at turn number 12 with plenty more. He's got to be careful of that, ride it too high and the car may end up being sent out wide. But so far, no understeer being triggered. All he's doing is mounting those curves aggressively. It's onto the grass. That is Blake Phillips who rejoins, and Phillips with a critical error there. Let's go to Alicia. He's ahead to lead of the AM class. Phillips now drops down to 5th place in the 225, and we'll get that lovely close-up there. The Pit Club Sim Racing drive just making a mistake. I think the pressure into turn 1 building a little bit there, and well, he brings himself back on just in the nick of time as Mark Stengel, 3rd place AM driver for Sunday GT Turtles. He's now got James Logston trying to keep him honest from behind as they head up towards turn number 6. Now, if you're Mark Senegal, what do you do in this situation? Do you let Logston go or do you fight it? Remember, they are encouraged to fight because they're all trying to score from the same points pool here. Everybody scores based on their overall finishing position, and those points are fed into the respective championships. However, given how early in the race it is, you would imagine that Mark Senegal might be thinking about letting it go, although his teammate, Jason Landry, will be very keen for Senegal to try and keep Logston at bay. As they make their way down the backstretch, we come back to them as we did see some passing photos there of McConnell and Landry. And well, here comes Logston up the inside, and Senegal doesn't fight this too hard. And in the end, 2 wide to go into the chicane, but it'll be 1 wide by the time they get to the first apex. And James Logston there sweeps his way through into 6th place. He's on the recovery drive here, as is Landry. And I would imagine that Senegal might be just doing a little bit more to protect the car first and foremost, rather than fighting too hard in the early stages of the race. But onto lap 4 they tour, and as they come on to another lap of racing, well, Julian Jones is now starting to be under a bit more pressure with Calloway, who's brought that gap back together. But, ladies and gentlemen, we need to take a look back at that race start, and in particular, what exactly happened for Logston and McConnell, and subsequently for Landry. So without further ado, let's take a trip into the past and see what exactly went wrong for several drivers right at the start. Here is a replay of lap 1. So we take a look back to the start, and what you'll see here, Jones on the left and Calloway on the right, as they went green flag race in the Res Rose. Well, it was a decent start from both drivers. The one who had the best start of them all, however, was Blake Phillips, who started in 3rd place. He got a brilliant start. I think part of him wanted to try and split the seas between the 2 pro drivers, but he also realised that might be a little bit dangerous. Now, as they made the way up the hill, our cameraman's going to focus here on McConnell as he headed up the hill. Now, 209 back side by side there with Logston. Did Logston get it wrong under braking here? Well, he went over the curb, he went a bit tight, and 2 wide coming down for return number 4. McConnell and Logston, they pinched together there. It's a bit of a difficult one between them. Can we get another replay of that? But perhaps I'm on board James Logston's perspective here, because I think Logston might have got pinched a little bit here in the side by side with Zuhair. Into the braking zone they went. Committed at this point now as they came on through. Collision course there. I don't think either driver can really be held fully accountable for this one. I think both were trying to sort out a bit of a situation, which was Logston was on a bit of a pinched line with Zuhair, and subsequently McConnell was trying to take his natural race line. I don't think McConnell knew Logston was there until it was too late. So I think there Logston had to fight hard with Zuhair, but in the end he put himself on a collision course with McConnell, and it takes 2 to tango, as they say in motorsport, and then Logston and McConnell coming together. That's going to be a very difficult one for the stewards to unpick if it gets reported. It may be treated as a racing instant, but both drivers there, I think, both trying to hold their lines, but in the end, unfortunately, in the compression through turns 3 to 4 before the Esses, there's only really 1 line there unless you're fully alert to the driver around you. Meanwhile, what happened to Jason Landry at the start? Well, this was Landry getting it all rolled, coming down the hill into the Esses, side by side with the 205 here, and as they made the way down, contact, that explains it. So contact with Blake Phillips, and that sent Landry sideways, and Phillips in the end, well, he'll be a little bit regretful of that one, and Landry will be a little bit annoyed at that. However, I definitely think, and that does go to the stewards. Well, it might be a bit of a clear slam and dunk between the 2 drivers as to who exactly might be at fault for that one. But the one thing I can definitely tell you is that Landry, well, he's definitely one of those drivers who tries to use his pro experience to pass on knowledge to drivers such as Blake Phillips in this instance, or anybody who's involved in the instance. Therefore, I don't think he'll be storming over to the garage and doing a Michael Schumacher on David Coulthard, if many of you remember that from the infamous Spa-Francorchamps Grand Prix many years ago. But Landry will just simply go, you know what, we could have done this better jointly, and this is what we can learn from it, because he's always trying to help out. And Phillips, I'm sure, will absorb that information like a sponge, as he normally does. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to your live racing, because, of course, a bit of a dramatic lap number 1, but things coming down now in the subsequent laps. So back we come then, and as we do, well, we look to Julian Jones, your race leader, as he roars his way on around. And as he does so, we've still got plenty of time over this race distance. We're on to lap number 6, and all drivers right now enjoying some brilliant scraps out there. But coming back to the AM lead battle in particular, Blake Phillips has caught back up to Zaher, so he may have made that mistake, and Aaron Lars right there with them. But right now, Phillips definitely has got the bit between his teeth as we jump on board. Now, when you're in the Le Pit Club Sim Racing 225, what you've got to be thinking at this point, is Phillips a bit more of a hunter rather than a hunted? Is he a bit more of the man who prefers to have the carrot in front of him or be hit with the stick, as the saying goes? Whereby, if you want to be hit with the stick, you're normally the lead driver and you've got the pressure from behind and you revel from pressure. Or is Phillips more of a chaser? Well, I think he is the chaser, because right now, this is a very different Blake Phillips on lap number 6. It's Blake Phillips that says, you know what, I can see a car in front of me, I want to go hunting. So here, meanwhile, he doesn't seem to be too afraid of being the one who's being chased by comparison. So I think both drivers are in their natural element now. This is going to lead to a brilliant AM lead battle that's going to take us the distance. Albeit I've said it, and I'm sure the commentator's curse is very quickly going to reveal itself before we even get to the pit stops, but we will wait and see. Speaking of pit stops, Daniel McConnell's into the pits nice and early. I suspect that's going to be to do some repair work to the car, but also because he sees he can get enough fuel in the car to get himself to the end of the race, because the 40% restriction on the fuel tank will force our drivers to have to pit at some point for a small splash and dash of fuel. So therefore, McConnell taking an early opportunity to use a fast repair and also fill the car and get him to the end of the race distance. Phillips here right now using all the exit at turn number 5, so here a little bit more conservative. That's two very different attitudes to that corner. Both of them very valid, of course, because the wider you run out wide, the bigger the rebound you have on the shocks of the suspension, and it can lead to the car oscillating and coming loose coming out of turn number 5, so here being a lot more conservative by comparison. Back to the front of the field, your two leaders, both ITT West drivers from two different divisions within ITT West. Will Calloway looking to the inside on the 37. Meanwhile, Jones holding to the outside here. I think he's going to try and fight it outside to inside through the chicane, and, well, his rival the other way. Too wide they enter, and in the end, Jaden Calloway is going to sweep into the lead here. And right now, Calloway is going to try and make it 2 wins from 2 in terms of his rounds this season. They are 6.5 seconds clear of the rest of the field, so they are in a comfort zone. The swap there, I don't think it's going to be the last time we'll see them swap places. And I think this might be a bit more of, you know what, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But we're going to go fighting at the very end of the race. Zaher versus Phillips. Well, here comes Blake Phillips up the inside. It's turn 1. It's going to be a classic move. Zaher decides to go all the way around the outside, but he doesn't get the switch back here. He tries to carry all the momentum up the hill, but in the end, Blake Phillips nails his line through turn number 1. So we have a new AM leader in the form of Blake Phillips, but Zaher is right there with him. As there has been a bit of drama for Daniel McConnell. Meanwhile, he's had to tow to the pits, in fact, after leaving the pit lane. And well, for Daniel McConnell, we'll get a replay of that shortly, but the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver is having a bit of a heartbreak race so far. It's not going right whatsoever. Aaron Lar a bit further back. He's got James Logsdon on the prowl now. Logsdon, who is still recovering into this race, as is Jason Landry. So all these drivers right now, these pro drivers, are trying to pick their way back through the field. But understandably, I think they're quite eager to just see how far they can go on this opening stint. We're not expecting any tyres to be changed. It'll purely be fuel that goes in the car. This race is far too short for what will be a tyre change. However, one of the key points being here, these tyres, they normally at full attack can last a maximum of somewhere around 15 to 25 minutes, depending on the circuit and the level of tyre degradation. The point being, over a 35-minute race distance, you will need to protect the tyres at some point. If you do not, then your pace is going to fall off in the final 10 minutes as a minimum, and that's why right now I think we're seeing some drivers back off the pace intentionally in order to try and give themselves a little bit more longevity. But of course, those who are not backing off, they see themselves as being able to gain some places early on, only then to be a weaker tyre life later on in the race distance. Up the hill, Calloway and Jones go once again, and then we come to Phillips and Zaher. Blake Phillips right now in a much happier place here as he makes his way over the crest and in towards turns 2, 3 and 4, but we'll have to wait and see whether the Le Pit Club Sim Racing driver feels a bit more confident now being the leader of the pair, and he doesn't mind the pressure coming on behind him, because of course we did see in the opening couple of laps that pressure seemed to get to him slightly through turn number 1, but not so at least this time as he comes out of turn number 5. The gap opens up to 6 tenths. He does seem to be a little bit more confident at the moment, at least, as they head in towards the right-handers of turns 6 and 7. Now, one of the things that Shaheen Zaher can do in the meantime is that he can do a little bit of fuel saving behind, and he can start to think about, okay, well, I might be able to beat him in the pits, so I might be able to gain 1 or 2 seconds, and those 1 or 2 seconds could see him leapfrog. So therefore, Phillips will know that right now he may be the leader, but it offers Shaheen Zaher a little bit more of a strategic advantage. And, well, if we look to the circuit map, one of the things that Phillips and Zaher will not be thinking about right now is coming into the pits, just because whilst we haven't got that many drivers on circuit, if they were to come into the pit lane, they would end up finding themselves in a bit of traffic, i.e. cars that have yet to pit, and therefore it would cost them time. But speaking of time, it's time to jump on board with Shahi Zahair as he gets a really good run out of the chicane. Now according to 11 and 12, and Zahair does seem to be very close, but is he too close for comfort? And the answer might be yes there. He backed off through 12, took a lot of apex curb, and I think that was to offset the dirty air, but in the process unsettled the car and realised, okay, I need to approach this a bit differently. I can't afford to get that close early on in the run to 12, as otherwise what I'm going to do, I'm going to put myself on a compromised line. Well, that dirty air definitely upset it in the front end of the 209. Comes down into the Esses here. Zahair really trying to attack the lap as much as he can. He's taking very early apex approaches here. That is to try and give himself the natural racing lap time. But the ITUSC Vice President's driver, in doing so, well, he's mounting those curves. And those curves, they do bite back if you take them too liberally. So we'll have to see just how much he wants to attack them versus how much he'll back off as they make their way onto the backstretch once again. Next now to the corner here. Will we see any short shifting? The answer will probably be no. Fuel saving typically achieved through lifting and coasting rather than short shifting, at least on iRacing. And as they make their way down the backstretch, up into 5th gear already, you can see they're getting ready to go to 6th gear shortly. They're only halfway down the straight at the moment. And would you believe it if I was to tell you that straight used to run all the way to turn 11? The chicane was added to make sure they didn't pick up as much speed going up the hill, because otherwise it'd be dramas. That's almost drama there. That was a bit of a scupped line there from what was Blake Phillips. I think he wanted to defend and then suddenly realised Zahair's not close enough, and Zahair decides, right, you know what, it's time to come into the pits. I've got an opportunity here. Hits the pit limiter line absolutely spot on, and will Blake Phillips, ooh, this will be interesting, because will he respond at the end of the next lap, at the end of lap 11? If he does so, then that will be to try and offset Zahair immediately. I think he might have to, because Zahair seemed to be a little bit more confident once again. Just that slightly defensive line at the chicane cost Phillips a lot of time with Zahair really just lulled him into a full sense of need to defend. Calloway and Jones, they're still together here at the very front of the field, and while they're battling even more so as I head in towards turn 6 and 7. But we need to take a quick look back at some racing earlier on, ladies and gents, but in particular, what went wrong to Daniel McConnell after he came out the pit lane. And here's a replay. Now, this was McConnell making his way down through the S's after the pits, so his tyres would have lost a bit of temperature. Goes a bit deep, small lockup, and McConnell just went straight on. I suspect there might have been an issue with the car, because for Daniel McConnell, that is completely unexpected. Meanwhile, we also had this happen for Aaron Lart on the same lap on lap number 7. This was Lart coming down towards the chicane. He was chasing after the AM leaders at the time, went into the braking zone, missed his braking point, went straight on, but did a good job of not locking up there. Just took a bit of grass, that cost him a lot of time. And I think James Logsdon subsequently saw this as an opportunity to pounce here as they made their way over the crest and down and through. So we're going to stay with this moment all the way round. And will James Logsdon in, tucked into the toe, look towards turn number 1 here. Was it a classic move into the opening corner? No, it wasn't. So where did Logsdon get it done exactly? He was having to be very patient here versus Lar, which, well, to be fair, Logsdon had so much pace, I would have thought he would have gone for it. But will we see it a little bit later on? We do, in fact, have a further replay here of Logsdon making the move. And it was a lap later, in fact, into the S's where he went for this. And this was on lap number 9. Lar went out wide, and in the end, Logsdon just picked up the pace and made his way past. So Logsdon there, incited it was a little bit of a mistake from Aaron Lar, and moving up into 5th place. But let's head back to your live racing, ladies and gents, because I think we're into pit stop mode for our AM leaders. And as we come back to live racing, well, Blake Phillips is still out there. He's decided not to come into the pit lane as of yet. Even with 19 minutes or so to go, he's going to go long. So, Shahi Zahair, where has the man who was chasing this man come back out? And the answer is he has come out in 9th place with a clear track in front of him. He's got no traffic to operate against. And for Zahair right now, the team will be on the radio for the pit wall and saying to him, Shahi, you need to go full attack at this point. It's going to be qualifying laps from now all the way to the very end of Blake Phillips's opening stint if you want to get ahead of him. But we will see what the target will be, because it was 9.2 seconds stationary. Zahair is the first driver to come into the pits for a pit stop and subsequently still out of the circuit. We did have that for Daniel McConnell, of course. However, he has since retired from the race, unfortunately, due to what seems to be a braking issue on the car. And Aaron Lar, meanwhile, he's under a bit of pressure from Jason Landry as James Logsdon's peeled into the pits. So we now got a second pit stop in order. But otherwise, it seems though nobody wants to pit right now. There's too much of a risk associated with pitting, perhaps. Glenn Bratton's in, so as soon as I say that, well, a couple more drivers are making their way to the pit lane here. They can hear me, I can tell you. Even though this is a past race, ladies and gentlemen, they can hear me. It's absolutely crazy to think that. It's not a coincidence whatsoever. But as the drivers make their way through the S's right now, Aaron Lar doing a good job here of keeping Landry behind, albeit runs out a bit wide there. Turn 5 costing Lar again. And while Landry will dive to the inside here in towards turn number 6, It's going to be a classic move on the braking, and he will move up into 4th place on the circuit, but we believe this is effectively what could be 5th or 6th place when always considered on strategy. Now, Logsdon has pitted. He's come out in 8th behind Zuhair by the best part of 3 seconds. There is Zuhair at the bottom of your screen, and there's Logsdon at the top of your screen. So that gives you an idea of what 3 seconds look like in the first half of the lap. But Logsdon, he has got the pace to match Zuhair, so we would imagine that these two are going to get quite familiar with each other towards the end of this race. Well, in the meantime, anybody else pitting? The answer is no. So it does seem as though those who come into the pits now, they've got to try and get themselves back up to temperature and attack, whereas those staying out, they're enjoying themselves and they're enjoying the tyre temperature that's on offer. And it's definitely leading to a bit of a contrast here between the drivers as to who will be the one to wilt first at the very front of the field, because Calloway and Jones, they're pushing each other onwards as much as possible, but neither is showing signs of defect into the pit lane. And well, they do have the information available to them, of course, from Zuhair coming into the pits as to where they would come out, and that would be somewhere in the region of just behind the battle for 4th and 5th place between Landry and Lahr. So therefore they would come out without too much traffic in front of them initially, and they may catch up to it later on. That's the only problem. That's why neither one wants to come in. But back to Lahr and Landry, they're separated by only half a second, so Lahr may have made the mistake, but right now, make no mistake, he is staying with the Sunday GT Turtles driver from Canada, and well, 2 fellow countrymen together, and right now it's the battle of Canadian pride as they head in towards turn 7. But from them, let's come a little bit further down the order, and we have Bilman da Costa. He's currently running a solid race in 4th place of our drivers ahead of Glenn Bratton. Bratton has pitted, it should be pointed out, whereas I believe Da Costa may not yet have pitted, although we can't verify that for certain. But the point being, Da Costa just keeping his head down after an early mistake in the race. Right now, trying to avoid any more mistakes. In fact, I think he may have pitted, to be fair to him. And he's really in the battle with Glenn Bratton for what will be the 4th place in the AM class, with Nick Bader not making it to the grid, sadly. Mark Senegal, of course, has yet to pit, and he's a bit further up the road. So Mark may yet fall into the clutches of the Bear Poke Zero driver, so that could be an interesting fight for what will be the final podium spot of AM. But at the front of the field, Calloway and Jones turn another lap as Aaron Lahr's into the pit lane here. And as he comes out, he releases Jason Landry. He lets him go, but Lahr decides, you know what, we're going to cut this race into almost 2 halves here and give himself a little bit more of an equilibrium in the race. Mark Senegal comes all through. The Sunday GT Turtles driver carries on his journey. He is yet to pit, of course. But we're on his way up the hill. Mark right now doing a very solid job, not putting any mistakes in at this moment in time. Albeit I say that, I have just received notification he did have a brief off track on lap number 14, so the previous lap. Although we don't quite have the replay footage available of what exactly happened to Mark. But to be fair, he's keeping his head down. And that previous lap from Mark was only 1 second slower than his previous best. So I suspect it might have been a slight run wide coming out of what had been turn number 7 or the chicane. But back to the very front, Calloway and Jones. It's the story for the lead this race. It has been for some time. Of course, they've yet to take their pit stops, so we're waiting to see how those pit stops factor into the equation. But Calloway has retaken the lead off of Jones midway through this opening stint. Right now, he is showing no signs of letting it go as we jump back on board here with the man who's in hot pursuit. Well, he's had a brilliant run out of turn number 12. It might be much hotter than just a hot pursuit here. It could be boiling hot heading in towards turn number 1. And well, it's not quite going to be so at the moment. But Julian Jones definitely close there and will fancy his chances at some point. I think right now Jones is having to make a decision here. Given the fact he's captured so quickly in the slipstream, does he pit or does he decide to stay out there and try and force Calloway to wilt under pressure? Well, the 2 teammates of ITC West, but they're part of 2 sub-teams there. So you can imagine that right now they're not going to be necessarily on the radio to each other, giving each other advice. They might be a little bit radio silent. And the idea behind this radio silence will be full concentration, which is demanded at Road Atlanta. And these 2 right now have yet to really put a significant foot wrong. They have been the stars at the front of the field. Jones there, not having the best of runs through turn 6 and 7. In fact, that gap opens up to 7/10 to Calloway as they exit out of turn 7. It will close up in the toe, but intriguingly, Calloway now seems to, as the tyre life is starting to go away from the cars, Calloway has given himself a little bit more confidence in the car. At least for this lap, but it could all swing the other way in due course as they come down the hill. Meanwhile, to Jason Landry, he makes his way past Blake Phillips, the AM class leader, who has yet to pit, of course, in his battle with Shahi Zuhair, and Landry storms his way on past here. Also, Landry is yet to pit, but Phillips definitely has his sensible head on here. He knows his target is to beat Zuhair and make sure Zuhair does not make it 3 in a row. However, to do so, he will use Landry as a little bit of what will be a pace car in front of him and try to pick up a bit of a distant toe for at least the start finish straight, if not a good portion of the next lap, and that might gain him some time back, whereas Zuhair right now has nobody to work with other than his own ability. And well, it's an interesting strategy because, of course, Phillips, he'll find himself facing a wall of dirty air in the initial 5 corners of this lap. And that is going to be a little bit painful on the front end if he's not ready for it. However, if he's ready for it and he's dialed in, he knows exactly where to turn in a little bit earlier and also carry a little bit less speed into the braking zones, then he will be able to come out on top with this one as Landry now opens up the gap to a second. If he gets it to 1.5 seconds, that distant tow is going to become negligible, and well, that will be to confound Phillips. In fact, 1.2 seconds here as they head in towards turn 6 and 7. So Blake Phillips may not be with Landry onto that back straight, and this may actually end up being all for naught for Phillips with the fact he's let Landry go, albeit sensibly, down the back straight. He didn't really lose any time letting Landry go, but I don't think he's going to gain any time now as he's 1.4 seconds away coming out of turn number 7. He may gain a little bit here, but it's going to be an absolute sliver of slipstream. He may gain 1 or 2 miles per hour at most at the very end of the straight. He is closing up a little bit now, but it is negligible the speed he's gaining compared to if he's within a second or more. The slipstream effect really becomes noticeable the closer you get. That sounds obvious, but a second or less it becomes very potent, and within 0.3 of a second, as you'll see it here from your leaders, it becomes absolutely monstrous. And that's why Calloway right now, well, to be fair, your race leader, he's doing nothing wrong here, and he's forcing Julian Jones to have to pick and choose as he runs so close behind. But over the crest down they go once again, and these drivers right now absolutely driving on the limit. Calloway, however, he may be being pushed, but it is Jones who's really having to be the aggressor as the chaser. And I would imagine that if Julian Jones has figured out any fuel saving at this point, I think that's gone out the window, because if Calloway is able to maintain this pace, Julian Jones having to drive right on the limit in order to stay with the lead. I think any fuel saving, and it would actually see this gap open up to the best part of a second and gradually extend. So it does seem to be right now these two are locking horns as much as possible. And Jones just with Calloway. It is Calloway who's in a bit of control at this point, and the body language of the cars is really telling the story for the two ITT West drivers. We're coming toward the end of lap number 18. We're almost at the end of 24 minutes of racing, or 25 minutes really. We are going to be due pit stop soon because the fuel tanks, they can't normally go the full distance here unless a lot of fuel saving's been done. But given the fact you do have multiple flat out sections and acceleration zones, you would imagine that fuel tank is going to run dry. And well, peeling his way over the hill, I think Calloway there trying to go Jones into thinking he was coming into the pits, but not quite so. The pit entry line, of course, being on the summit at turn number 11. And right now, Jones is back there with him again as they head into turn 1. Jones doing an incredible job here of staying close behind. In fact, that gap has never extended to more than 0.7 of a second. It's always extending out to turns 6 and 7, but turns 1 through to 5, which you'll see here, Jones right now really does seem to be so confident into the Esses with regards to running that dirt. Yeah, it's not something you normally see for a driver. You normally see most drivers really struggle when they are in that dirty air through the Esses. They have to back off, but Julian Jones right now, well, if he does back off a little bit, he's not really showing any signs of it because that gap back up to 0.7 here as they come into turn 6 and 7, but Jones is not going away. Blake Phillips, meanwhile, he is still out there, and Phillips does have the best part of a 30-second gap over Shahi Zahair. That right now, it will be very close between Zahair and Phillips. It's all going to come down to who is going to spend more time filling up the car. Now, if you are Blake Phillips at this point, you may not be able to do too much fuel saving here, given when you are on circuit, but one of the things that Phillips could intentionally do if he wants to take track position, it would be very risky. He could intentionally underfuel the car by about half a lap. Now, stay with me here on the logic, ladies and gentlemen. The idea would be, if Phillips does so, and it means that he comes out in front, he can then control track position and he can fuel save into sections of the lap where Zahair can't overtake him. For example, the Esses, it's only 1 wide through there unless you enter 2 wide, so Phillips could really back off the car a little bit through there and try to save the fuel that he's missing. Alternatively, he could do it under braking into likes of what would be at the chicane, but we'll have to wait and see. And the alternative is if Phillips comes out directly behind Zahair, he can fuel save off the back of him to make up the missing fuel. But Phillips is in, Landry's in, Zahair meanwhile, here he is heading down towards the chicane right now. Mark Senegal will surely be in soon as well then, and that will release Zahair to go battling with Phillips. But where will it put the story? Senegal's into the pit, Lars into the pit lane. I think there's a bit of an issue with the car there for Aaron Lar because he's been in there for a long time right now. But we look to the blimp camera and here he comes on through. Where is Phillips? Well, you'll see him at the bottom of the screen if he's parked up. There he is, still in his pit stall. Zahair right now, well, as Phillips is released there by the pit team, well, as he makes well through, there is going to be Phillips. Zahair's going to look around the outside. It's going to be practically 2 wide as they head up the hill. They're dead even as they come to the rise, but Zahair just squeezed ahead into the braking zone for turn number 3, and Shahi Zahair gets ahead, but by the smallest of margins. And right now, Blake Phillips will be on the attack immediately here. He'll need to get the tyre temperature as quickly as he can, but if he can bring those tyres back into their operating window within this lap, then this is going to be a battle for the AM victory that's going to go to the wire. James Logsdon, however, could have a role to play here, because right now the pro driver who ended up in that lap 1 instant with McConnell, he may be looking at this and thinking, I want to clear both those AM drivers to gain as many points as possible for the Pro Championship. Well, of course, every place is worth extra points for a pro driver. It's for any driver out there. But for James Logsdon right now, this is a race that's not gone the right direction, and therefore he'll want to move it back in the right direction by the end of time. But we've got 7.5 minutes left on the clock plus the final lap. Calloway and Jones are both into the pit lane, and meanwhile Zahair and Phillips are getting very close. Phillips looking around the outside here on the brake, and Zahair immediately goes defensive. Now, will Phillips commit all the way to the inside of the next corner? No, he won't. He'll back off, but Zahair will keep it right there. Meanwhile, at the exit of the pit lane, Jaden Calloway has come out ahead of Jones. They swap places once again. So Jaden Calloway has been able to take back the lead off of Jones coming out of the pits. They've made the one through. Meanwhile, we'll come back to there versus Phillips. Phillips now looking up the inside. Door up between them into turn number 1. And as they come through that corner, well, Blake Phillips retakes the lead. He gets his elbows out. James Logsdon's into the pit lane. And Logsdon in, I believe, for what will be some fuel. That's a bit of a surprise there. We'll have to get an update if we can. I think, in fact, Logsdon might be in for a drive-through penalty for track limits. And in fact, Logsdon has not stopped, so he's making his way on through. So James Logsdon right now is going to lose places again and have to work it quite hard. So I think they're just hitting the maximum instant count that's allowed. And was ahead of Phillips. They're here once again on our screens. And Phillips has taken the lead with that brilliant move, that full confidence move in towards turn number 1. It is so razor close between these two. Out to turn 7 they come, and look at that, ladies and gents. Right now, if they were any closer, they would practically be sharing the same car. But right the way down the back straight, then was ahead 2.5 tenths on exit at turn number 7. He's going to be right there with Phillips coming down towards the braking zone. Now gaining little by little here. Phillips, where does he put the car? He puts it centre inside in towards the corner. So this is going to enable Zahair to look around the outside again. Now Phillips tried it didn't quite work. Zahair tries it, doesn't work either. So both drivers struggling on that outside line. But I also wonder whether neither driver wants to commit right now, because they've still got a few laps to go here. And well, if you're both Blake Phillips and Shaheed there, one lockup will be the difference between you being in this battle and potentially out of it very quickly. So neither driver wants to make an error. They're both playing it quite close to their chest. James Logsdon, will he serve that drive-through penalty for what was instant points? And now he's going to look around the outside of what will be Glenn Bratton coming down towards the chicane. Bratton being your full place AM driver at the moment. He lets Logsdon go eventually here, and well, as they come down towards the braking zone, Logsdon regains a place back up to 7th. That's not where he wants to be whatsoever. And I believe it was a run out wide coming out of the chicane, just as we did see Phillips and Zahair start go battling, which caused Logsdon to be required to come into the pits for what was a black flag essentially for the track limits. He runs out wide out at turn number 12, backs to the throttle for a slowdown, and Glenn Bratton takes the place back there. James Logsdon just not in a happy place here at Road Atlanta. The rhythm's gone, the rhyme and reason's going with it, and right now he wants to try and pick his way back through. As we jump on board the Bear Pope Zero driver, this is a very frustrating situation for him. Bratton's not doing anything wrong. Bratton, to be fair, is driving a very solid race. That's the thing we've come to really enjoy for Glenn Bratton, and many of you may remember that his huge result in the GR86 Championship, where he took his first ever win in the AM class and with an overall pole position as well, as my memory serves me correctly, in that incredible qualifying session. Well, right now, Bratton doing everything right here for one of those consistent drives at what is Road Atlanta, and consistency and Road Atlanta are two things that legends are born of when we say those together, albeit as soon as I praise him, he breaks himself in towards turn number 7, and now Logsdon surely is going to have the run here down the back straight. On a compromised exit line, he will gradually pull ahead, but he's going to be hoping that Bratton backs out a little bit before they get towards the chicane, because otherwise it might be an absolute battle on the braking here between the two of them. Logsdon cuts across, Bratton switches to the outside, so I think there Logsdon covers off the inside, and Bratton says, that's okay, I get the message, I don't really want to fight this right now, and that is why that's what the place is, and Logsdon takes her place back at long last. He'll be saying to himself, but not about the fear of more mistakes. He has to come into the pits again. Those track limits for James Logsdon are really hurting him, and that could see his race really in arrears right now. And I think, in fact, he might be at risk of losing what will be 8th place to his teammate Bill DaCosta as he comes towards the pits, unless they underfueled the car by accident when he did take his pit stop. And if so, for Logsdon, this race is going from good to bad to worse very quickly, and we'll get you an update on that when we can, ladies and gentlemen. As we do see Blake Phillips and Zahair close together, well, right now nothing between these two are leaders overall. They have separated. Jaden Calloway has opened up a bit of a gap versus his rival of Julian Jones. So I think there that might have now started to stabilise. And for James Logsdon, the car has made its way to a stop in the pit lane. But what's it doing in the pits? Well, in fact, no, James Logsdon's out of the circuit. My apologies. And And well, in fact, no, as I check the time towel there, the information's coming in very quick and fast. James Logston, I think they've retired the car from the race. I think it's just not worked out for Logston, and they've decided enough's enough. We're going to call it there today, and what understanding for James Logston, that's going to lock in what will be a bit of a difficult score for him. A very frustrating race that even gets to the very best of us out there. And James Logston, one of the finest, no doubt about it, but today, Road Atlanta really has just not clicked for him. But coming from an AM lead battle then to the overall lead battle, Calloway versus Jones. And right now, Julian Jones does have one of the drivers who's a lap down right in front of him. That is Billman DaCosta. However, I think Jones will be quite happy he's found DaCosta where he has, because that's going to give him a bit of an overspeed here down the back straight. And that will help him get a bit closer to Calloway. So Julian Jones might, and I emphasise just might be closing back up here. However, it will come down to the corners, and with 2 minutes and 20 seconds left to go, they're going to get 2 more laps in as they get ready to turn what will be a 25th lap of the circuit here at Road Atlanta. And right now for Julian Jones, well, he really needs to close up at this point, because if he can't get that gap back down to about 6 tenths come the final lap, Calloway may have this unless there's any last minute surprises in there, such as fuel loads for example, or sudden mistakes of our leader. But Calloway and Jones, they have both been absolutely resolute right now, and it seems like both drivers here don't make mistakes. It's all going to come down to fine margins and who has got the edge over the distance. You'd have to say Calloway right now is showing a little bit more longevity in his pace compared to Jones, but it only takes one tiny error and suddenly Julian Jones might be right back there with him. But through the Esses sequence there, it was Calloway who just took 4 tenths out of Jones, and indeed right now the race leader opening up that gap here. He just seems to have the tyres in his favour. Back to Blake Phillips versus Zahair, the AM lead battle. Well, this is the fight for 4th overall, so some big points on the doors here for both drivers, and that's what we consider the bonus points as well for our AM runners. Well, Phillips versus Zahair, it's so close right now, you can cut the tension with a knife. We jump aboard here for their penultimate lap of racing at Road Atlanta, and Zahair, well, he's timeless, he's observing, and right now he's going to be making mental notes of everything Phillips does right and everything that Phillips does wrong. And he'll be thinking, right, where do I pounce for the final lap? Where's the best place to go for it? 'Cause you don't want to be the leader until the very end, until you see that checker flag, because on this back straight, anything can happen. It normally does. And our Team West Senior Vice President's driver right now in that tow. Phillips goes defensive. Zahair, he's going to look for it. No, he backs off there. Now, will that lure Phillips into a full sense of security? It may cause him to outbrake himself, but it does neither this time. But the point being, Zahair playing his cards, very smart. They go on to one more tour, ladies and gentlemen. Our leaders are already onto the 26th and final lap, and now our AM leaders go the same as well. Jason Landry is 10 seconds up the road. He looks to be in a comfortable 3rd place finish overall for this one. But right now, the big battle, Phillips versus Zahair. Can Blake Phillips prevent Shahi Zahair making it 3 in a row for this season? Or can Zahair find a way through right at the end? Well, right now, Phillips is in control, but as the wiper goes on there to clear the debris off the windscreen, we could see at the very end of this lap, it all goes the other way. You never know until they get to that checker flag, but Zahair is absolutely hounding and hustling the car through the corners. But Phillips there gets a much better run for the Esses initially, but runs out wide as they head up towards turn number 6. Now, will this be Zahair's opportunity? Phillips goes defensive. He knows that right now he's vulnerable into turn 6, and Zahair doesn't play his cards completely. He goes to the switchback here. He's going to look for it into 7. Doesn't quite get it. Pulls back onto the racing line. Causes Phillips to park in the middle of the road. It will compromise the exits. There's a lot of wheel spin there, a lot of oversteer, but he just about collects it. But does that spoil his run? The answer is yes, it does. It opens up the gap to half a second. That may be it in their battle. As meanwhile, we come back to the front of the field and the clock strikes 0. And the Jaden Calloway, it's time to go from 0 to hero as the 37 driver takes victory at Road Atlanta over in pro, head of Julian Jones, who takes the runner-up spot. Meanwhile, in 3rd place, it will be Jason Landry, who fights his way back to the podium. But in the AM lead battle, Shahi Zahair might have thrown everything at this one, but it's not going to be 3 in a row for Zahair, because for Blake Phillips, it's going to be triumph for the 3rd time of asking. And what a drive for the Le Pit Club Sim Racing driver. Takes 4th place overall, but the AM victory on the road ahead of Shahi Zahair. What a battle between the two of them over 35 minutes. And then we will have a sizable bit of time before we do get to your 6th place finisher of Mark Senegal, as our top 5 start to cool on down. Billman DaCosta has already finished his race a lap down, but good on him for sticking in it all the way to the end and taking that 8th place finish. Some good points for him and the team. And then it will be none other than what will be Mark Senegal, who comes on through to round off the podium of the AM drivers there for Sunday GT Turtles with another resolute 6th place finish. And then we will have a further 14 seconds before we get to your last finisher on the lead lap, and it will be Glenn Bratton who comes on through here. The privateer, well, he didn't quite have the pace today, but he definitely kept his cool and brought the car home, and he'll be very happy with that one and what has been a very tough round of racing for so many. But the story today, of course, well, it was Jaden Calloway. As all look at that, as they all get together, making their way down the back straight. That's worth a photo or two, ladies and gentlemen. And well, ITD West today, it's a 1-2. But Jaden Calloway ahead of Julian Jones. And well, it all ends up in a bit of tears there. And well, it's censored over the hill. But Blake Phillips in the end taking the AM win and breaking Shahi Zaher's stranglehold on the top step of the AM podium. And we have got a title fight on our hands, ladies and gentlemen, in the AM class, as much as we have a four-way fight at the very top of Pro. But as all our drivers cool on down, we look to the scenic view, and as we do, let's take a look at those race results subject to any stewards' inquiries, and here they are. So after an impressive 35 minutes of racing in round number 3 of the Middle of the Pack Racing League, fall into PCUP Championship for 2025, as brought to you on iRacing, Jaden Calloway, your overall and pro winner there for ITD West by 2 seconds over his sister team rival for ITD West Interns Pro Esports Division, Julian Jones. It was back and forth between the two of them all the way over the distance. Jones was the pole sitter, but Calloway had the stronger race pace over the distance, and I can imagine if the race was a bit shorter, Jones may have fancied his chances, but over 35 minutes, Calloway just managed to protect the tyres a little bit more, and that was his edge. Jason Landry took third place there for Sunday GT Turtles, but to be fair to, he threw everything at this one after an early issue and well recovered well to a third place finish. Blake Phillips, your AM winner, 4th place overall. The Pit Club Sim Racing driver took pole position, and whilst he wasn't able to run away from Shahi Zaher, he was able to put a staple on this one to make sure he would break Shahi Zaher's deadlock on what was the top step of the podium. Was Zaher in the end not quite able to make it 3 in a row, planning to settle for his first second place finish in class of the season. From the ITD West Senior Vice President's driver, it was then Mark Senegal who rounded off the AM podium with 6th place for Sunday GT Turtles, and then we did have Glenn Bratton in 7th there, missing out on the AM podium but bringing the car home and your last lead lap finisher. From 7th to 8th, Bill DaCosta was lapped down, but the Bear Poke Zero drive finished ahead of his teammate, what was James Logston, who did finish the race technically, as he did retire within 4 laps of the race winner, so he will be classified there. And unfortunate for James Logston, but we hope to see plenty more from him at Long Beach in a week's time. Aaron Law, he was classified as a non-finisher, as was Daniel McConnell for Texas Speed Sim Racing, and also Nick Bader, who was a non-starter with technical issues with the car and wasn't able to make it to the grid. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes your rundown of the results, and it does mean, without further ado, it is now time for us to wrap up here from Road Atlanta. So thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to know more about the Middle of the Pack Racing League community, in terms of being on the grid with us, or just what we're all about, or just getting to know the team, the staff, and the drivers behind the Middle of the Pack Racing League, with all that and more, we definitely recommend you join our official Discord. You won't find a more friendly place for sim racers around the world, predominantly focused on the North American continent, and also on, that is the time zones on that side of the globe. But indeed, the Middle of the Pack Racing League has seen many a driver race in its series from America all the way through to Japan and also the United Kingdom. But if you don't want to join the Discord, perhaps you're a little bit shy or more of a social media person, you can of course follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/MOP Racing, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and announcements and all things MPRL. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, attention turns of course to our second portion of our American doubleheader, and next time, when it will be our own Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach, because in round number 4 we'll be seeing our first feature race round. 50 minutes of racing will be in downtown Long Beach along the coastline, and as all drivers get set there for what is going to be a thriller, it will be of course a reverse grid for our classes, and therefore there's going to be action from lights out to checker flag, and come the end of it all, who will be our Middle of the Pack Racing League Cup champions to bookend their first half of the season. In Pro, we have definitely seen an absolutely stellar performance from our drivers across the class, but in particular we have seen now things get very close to nip and tuck between the likes of Jaden Calloway and Julian Jones, and with many a driver missing from the grid today, including Matt Best in particular, well, you can imagine it's going to be very tight when they all return to the race in a week's time. And in the AM class, well, Shahi Zaher might have been the big name at the top, but Blake Phillips has closed the gap, and it'll be looking very tight between them as we head into round 4. All the racing will occur as of Wednesday the 22nd of October, but come join us if it were live as we return to our regular Saturday broadcast slot on Saturday the 25th of October 2025. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, we've been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, like our drivers, remember to stay on track. Good night.